The Bank of Japan disappointed investors today as the central bank refrained from taking further action to curb unusual volatility in the market. Lutz Karpowitz of Commerzbank is on the phone with me now to discuss today's rate decision. Lutz, this lack of action was immediately felt in the markets as Tokyo's Topix index fell, retreating from the biggest advance in 2 years. How long can the central bank continue to ignore this volatility, and at what cost to the Japanese stock market?
Well, first of all, it does not come as a surprise that for equity markets it was a disappointment that the central bank didn't become even more expansionary. That's something of a usual case, I would say. But frankly said, from my point of view, all this volatility is actually due to this very expansionary monetary policy, because it creates some risks for JGBs as well, and that's why we see all this volatility in equity markets and, of course, FX market as well.
Abenomics was considered to be paying off, as data showed Japan's current account surplus had doubled in April from a year earlier, and bank lending posted its biggest annual rise in over 3 years. Are there concerns of a boom bust, or can this be considered secure and sustainable?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, current account surplus in April, I mean, that's just 1 month. That was pretty positive, but it doesn't change the overall picture that the current account surplus is in Japan deteriorated in the last years. Regarding Abenomics, I mean, the point is we always know that a very expansionary policy or monetary policy usually fuels the economy at the beginning. So then that's why you see some higher growth rates, for example. But at the end, what you usually get is inflation and less real growth. So I would not consider the Abenomics to be a success story at the end.
FX markets will now be watching the yen, which has been touted as the worst performing currency for 2013 so far. The currency had strengthened by as much as 7% since the last BoJ interest rate decision. Can we expect something similar? What are your forecasts here?
We are pretty pessimistic for the yen. The reason is simply that with these very expansionary monetary policy, first of all, the central bank is aiming to weaken the yen. Before the G20 meeting and the statement that all G20 countries will refrain from competitive devaluations, we also had some verbal interventions in the yen frequently. So this stopped now, but of course, this very expansionary policy is an approach to weaken the yen. What might be much more difficult is the point that the Bank of Japan already created inflation expectations, but inflation itself didn't pick up, because at the bond market you see higher yields, you see a higher risk premium. So that means that financing the public debt becomes more difficult. I mean, usually finance ministers like more inflation because that just brings debt down. But if you create inflation expectations and you don't get real inflation, that means that your debt service is becoming much more difficult. And that's why we see a very high correlation between JGB yields and yen recently, which is just signaling that there are some concerns in the market about the sustainability of Japanese debt at all.
Given the clear official preference for yen weakness, as you've mentioned, could we even anticipate further intervention, be it physical or verbal?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, verbal interventions, I think we won't have anymore, and real interventions have been not much of a problem when there was this very strong appreciation of the yen, and everybody knew that that was not something due to inflation in Japan, but rather to some safe haven function. So if we would come back to that situation, let's say dollar yen at rates at 75 or let's say below 80, we might get some interventions. But this is not our forecast, and I'm very sure that we won't see any real intervention just to continue weakening the yen. I mean, this was just some kind of consolidation we saw in dollar yen, and I'm very confident that we're going to see higher rates in dollar yen very quickly.
Thanks very much, Lutz. I'll be back tomorrow with a look at the Icelandic economy. Goodbye for now.